restaurants close and people forever think it's, a failure that a restaurant has to close. Like, people just think restaurants will go on forever, but they don't. And to be, like you said, I had hands sort of forced to make that tough decision. And when I realised that it was not worth the business continuing to line somebody else's pockets, I felt a lot better.
This is the Deep in the Weeds podcast. I'm Anthony Huckstep. With slim margins and long hours, most in the industry fight their entire careers to hold onto their restaurants. Some say surviving 10 years is a rarity, while others say all good things must come to an end and restaurants, no matter how good, shouldn't be forever. Making the decision to close a successful restaurant is never an easy thing to do, and neither is opening a new restaurant, especially in a pandemic. Karl Firla is the co-owner of Restaurant Leo in the CBD of Sydney. Karl, how are you going, mate?
I'm very well, thank you. Very well. Thanks for the invitation and allowing me to speak of my experiences.
It's good to have you, mate. You've had a hell of a year. You closed one of Sydney's most famous restaurants and opened a new one during the pandemic. What's the last year been like for you?
I tell you, it was definitely the picture I had drawn myself. It wasn't quite what I've had to role play through in the last 6 months, that's for sure. But nonetheless, look, it is what it is. It was the end of a wonderful experience in Australia Street in Newtown, and building a platform which I was extremely proud of and very lucky to have continued for so long. And now I'm in the next challenge, which is trying to stay in front of the oncoming tsunami of changes that I see every single day in this business.
We'll get to Restaurant Leo in a little while, which you opened during the pandemic, but you closed Oscillate Wildly, which is one of Sydney's most famous restaurants where you won many awards. What was the reason behind that?
Look, Oscillate after a lengthy, I think I was there 10 years, and it was an established platform before I got in the business. But yeah, when I walked in and took over, we flicked over to a degustation platform only. Look, it was a great 10-year experience. It was owned by an older gentleman who was actually one of the judges from across the road on Australia Street at the Newtown Courts, and it became a very much a gentleman's handshake agreement, although there was a lease component involved. But it was one of those spaces where, for the period of my time there of 10 years, I rarely spoke to the landlord other than to say hello when I saw him. Unfortunately, he passed away, and the building which he owned, not only Oscillate, the adjoining businesses, we'd all had a lease that was teed up just through his structure, all falling in at the same time. So when he unfortunately passed away, his buildings, not only that one but others, were handed over to a law firm to manage for beneficiaries. And we were all very unaware of this until we received contact and from the law firm, and were handed a new lease contract with short term and a very steep increase in rental returns. And they didn't really care to worry about what business we were and how long we'd been there and what we were doing. It came down to them to a dollar amount only. So I had to make a very, very tough decision. Probably the hardest thing I've had to decide on was to either continue and change the product that I'd worked so hard to achieve and was comfortable with, or leave it and go rather than line somebody else's pockets. So at the end of the day, it's like you said, all good things come to an end. So I was extremely fortunate to have amazing staff, an amazing time, an amazing product. And then, it was just one of those things. I had to make a decision, and my decision was, sometimes business is not worth that. It's just not worth pushing the business to something else that you don't want it to be for somebody else. So I decided it was time to finish.
Well, Oscillate Wildly, has an amazing legacy. There's some extraordinary chefs worked in that kitchen, and Dan Puskas was there before you took over, and then you've had so many amazing chefs work under you there. Who are some of the chefs that have been through that kitchen, and how did it change over that 10 years?
Yeah, look, it changed a lot from day one. I don't think I remember vividly that the one of the first lines in the first review was that there was only two of us in Australia as a fine dining dinner only / degustation only platform. It was us and Tetsuya, and I think I was pretty crazy and I didn't quite realise what I was doing when I did it. That we were going to just do that. I was like, it can't be that hard. It's got to be easier to do this than it does to be doing an a la carte platform with an option as a tasting menu. Like, let's just do it. So it was a pretty tough start because the comparison was straight away that, and you're going up against somebody who's with international status and an amazing product and had built his name and his platform around that as a product, and then for some unknown kid to walk into Sydney from outside and try and chuck that into Newtown, it was a risk. It was a risk to say the least. But look, it's got to be something you enjoy doing. Like, I have not regretted going to work a single day that I've been working for the last, I don't even know how many years I've been cooking now, a while, 20 odd years. Like, I love going to work. I just love it. So if I was going to do my own thing, it had to be something I love doing, and that's what it was. And I was lucky. Look, it was luck. Yeah, of course, there's always got to be some component of luck. But the people that wanted to come and work and try and help me create what became Oscillate from day one to the last day. I had Dan Pepperell came at the very beginning. I had him as my sous chef. He started at day one with me, and I had other people, that have been in and out of that business and in and out of the trade. There was a lot of people who came at that very beginning who chose to leave the industry after. I think I lost 3 people in the first 12 months who decided that they were going to get out of the industry after coming. And I had to go home, and my wife said to me, she said, what are you doing to people? If they're leaving the industry, you've got to be doing something wrong. And I was sitting there scratching my head thinking, what am I doing wrong? But I think it's just that push and search to make everything better every day that not everybody's up for, and that is something that I try and do every day, is go in, work out what I did wrong yesterday or how I can better whatever I did yesterday. And sometimes that means turning everything up on its head. So it's just, it's kind of how I work. So, but yeah, I was very fortunate. I've had great staff at the front of house. I had Gerald Ryan, who worked, who came from Bray, who also worked for Dan at Royal Mail. I had people from overseas who worked for us and were back overseas. I was very, very fortunate to have amazing people help me build what was an amazing platform.
It was a very small restaurant and an even smaller kitchen. What was it like running such a small venue and trying to turn a profit?
Oh, yeah, look, this industry, as everybody knows, it's super slim. Like, the margins are small, but I think when we went in there, look, you'd never go into a business of that size with that business model and expect to turn huge profits. I think what we tried to do was just be competitive in what we do as an advancement in the industry, and if that meant we had to spend money on things that didn't generate an income, it didn't matter. It was about just getting better. It was about getting better and better, making sure that it was extremely fair across the board. I was very open with everybody about allowing them to see what was coming in, what was going out, and there's no money lining my pockets. It's just about building a better product. So, look, it was, yeah, by no means easy, and you dip into your pocket more often than not. But at the end of the day, like I said, I had 10 years there where I didn't regret a day going in. So that far outweighs the money for me.
You have an amazingly deft touch and cook just absolutely beautiful food. How would you describe the sort of food you were doing at Oscillate?
Yeah, I'll go back. My brother, if I don't mention him, he'll cut my legs off. He's like, I swear, he's probably better than me. He's yeah. Look, I think the product that we did at Oscillate was something that tasting platform for me. When you have an operation that is you're expecting people to come in. They don't have a choice. They're told what they're gonna do as far as you're going to come for dinner only. You're going to sit in a small group, and we're not going to give you any understanding as to what you're having for dinner from start to finish until it's in front of you. So I think with that, the trust that comes from the guest, you really need to make sure that the product you put out is super tuned. Like it's the progression from start to finish for me needs to be a beautiful flow. There needs to be, it needs to be from every course something that just it doesn't necessarily need to be a flavor profile. It doesn't need to be an ingredient. It doesn't need to be anything aesthetic. It just needs to be something there that helps link one to the next, and it just becomes a beautiful progression from start to finish. And I think, I don't know, that's how I think I found myself thinking. And I think it comes most certainly from training and from people that I worked with in the past. But it's the way that I think for that platform, you really need to make sure that you're completely across the board on if you're wanting to give an experience like what we were giving.
I've eaten at Oscillate many times, as you know, and you are a real perfectionist when it comes to the plate. Is there any dish or other dishes that you feel like you really nailed?
Oh, and that changed in the 10 years we were there. That came with, I think, obviously from starting on a lower budget and having less to put out, and then we we had to think more about, as you see now, people using different forms of transferring the food as a vessel from the kitchen to the table. So with that, the way things worked at Oscillate and the way I sort of built the menu through the times of the year, some things would come where I would be at the markets and I'd see a product and I'd be like, oh my God, I've got to work out how I get that somewhere in the menu. Other times I was out in the middle of nowhere and I'd see somebody had made there'd be a stack of plates or a bowl or something, and I'd just pick them up and I don't know what I'm going to do with them, but they're going in the cupboard, and as soon as it'll work itself out at some point, because I've got to work out how to use them, because never was there one before the other. It was always a mix match, and you would just, sometimes you'd come up with a dish and it didn't work on a plate, so you'd leave the dish and you'd worry about it later. It would come back on the menu next season if you found something as a vessel that you were happy with. But I don't know, I think you always eat with your eyes first. So aesthetically, it doesn't always have to be amazing. I think it just needs to be a part of that transitional story through the menu, per se, in that sort of an eating platform.
You made the tough decision, or your hands were kind of forced to make a tough decision to close Oscillate Wildly. How did you feel at that time, and did you have a plan of what you would do next then?
Okay, one thing in business which I remember sitting down when I started Oscillate was you should always have an exit plan, and I never did. So for that reason, I'm guilty of not having the exit plan, which probably wouldn't have been the exit plan I would have applied anyway. Look, yeah, it's for 2 months. I didn't tell anybody. My wife knew, and I couldn't let on to staff. But for sure, my persona in the space changed very quickly because of the fact that I had a huge amount of pressure as to what decision to make. I mean, it became a legal issue. We had lawyers involved because I had to get myself out of trouble at the right at the beginning. I think I paid about 5 months of rent straight up, so that they could, like, that night, so they couldn't kick me out. And then I had to sit and make a decision with them pressuring us every other day. But yeah, it was, look, I wasn't ready to leave, so it was a really, really tricky thing to do. But I had to sit down and weigh up. And restaurants close, and people forever think it's, a failure that a restaurant has to close. Like, people just think restaurants will go on forever, but they don't. And to be, like you said, I had hands sort of forced to make that tough decision. And when I realised that it was not worth the business continuing to line somebody else's pockets, I felt a lot better. But yeah, you for sure, you worry about having to tell your staff, like, how are you going to translate that issue without, legally getting yourself into trouble. You're not allowed to badmouth anybody. So we kind of had to devise a plan to ideally put out the situation in between the lines. But there's always doubt as to whether or not you have made that right decision. Are you going to be able to do something ever again? Nothing's ever going to be the same. But it was a great experience, and look, I felt a lot better after making the decision and actually releasing it that we were leaving. And I feel like I made the right decision.
Well, you changed our perceptions of finer dining in Australia, and you ended up teaming up with a chef, Federico Zanellato, that also changed our perceptions with Italian fine dining. How did Restaurant Leo come together?
So Federico was, when I started Oscillate, like I said, I'm not from Sydney originally, so look, I've worked in, I worked at Mark, which is an amazing platform to be in. I worked for the Maryvale Group for a couple of years with Pete at Est. But I didn't really know the industry because I just came from outside. So I wasn't in the circle of all these people that have been in Sydney for so long and know each other. So when I started Oscillate, Federico, who's also not from Sydney, obviously, he was one of our first guests through the door. And I just remember, like, he asked to come to say hello. So, we met each other at the very beginning of that, which was his time. I think he was still at Ormeggio. And we just hit off an amazing friendship. I was very humbled that somebody wanted to say hello to the kitchen and come in, and chefs do that. That's what we do. We're generally, for the most part, pretty nice. So from that we struck up an amazing relationship, and then obviously LuMi was a similar platform, degustation only, to Oscillate. So we had lots of things in common, lots of things to discuss, lots of business things to talk about and compare, and just the industry in general. We have, like, obviously a lot in common with our business models there. And we'd always toyed around with the idea of, we should do something together. So when I was making the decision at Oscillate, he was one of two people that I discussed what was happening with, and it was him and another good friend, Pasi Patanen, and it was one of those things. It was either going to be have a break and do nothing at all, or get back into a business. And once you've been doing it for so long, you kind of, it's such an enjoyable platform. I'm not going to go and work for somebody else. I've got to go back into doing something myself or with somebody again. And so here's Leo. Leo is the two names LuMi and Oscillate. L and O stand for both of our business names, and O is and in Italian. So it's LuMi and Oscillate as Leo.
And you opened this year, and as everyone is aware, there's a sort of a major pandemic on. What's this period been like? The stresses of opening a restaurant in itself are pretty big.
Yeah.
But it's been a pretty big year as well.
Yeah. So the business, look, we took over the keys in late February for the business in the CBD, and look, that transition took, I think we signed in December for the paperwork, and then the contract of sale and all the rest of it dragged on forever. And in hindsight, that's been to our advantage. So we didn't get keys until late February. So March, we walked in the door and we started having ideas of design and all the rest of it, and what we're going to take out and what we're going to change and how we're going to structure all the new ways of the business. And I think within the space of 2.5 weeks of having keys, the city was empty, and we were sitting there scratching our heads thinking, oh my God, what is happening? We've just committed to a 250 square metre space in the heart of the CBD, and committed staff, and everything's going to go on hold. So it was pretty scary at the beginning. It was, like everybody, a huge amount of unknown. The things that we did know were that we had a very big lease to fill, and a commitment to staff, and a product which I think now we're lucky we had that. We're lucky we had a pause with everything to stop and quickly make some changes and reflect on what we were going to do and what we think we're going to do moving forward. But yeah, look, we're all in the same boat, so I'm not so fussed at the fact that if it was only us, if we'd been turned on our head by ourselves, I would have been a little bit more worried. But look, all good things come to those who wait. So I'm just going to be patiently waiting until this blows over, and we'll keep running the way we are now, moving forward.
What is the offering at Leo? And can you take us through what the restaurant is?
Yeah. So look, this when we built the plan of the restaurant and then the product that we're going to put forward, there's actually in this venue 3 different outlets. So we have the restaurant floor, which internally seats 70, I think, 73. And then there's a servicing area in between that and the other end of the internal component, which we have a cafe and a bakery component that also flips into an aperitivo bar come the afternoon. So there's 3 different business models we wanted to launch. So we rebranded one end, which is the cafe and the aperitivo bar. We called that Pico Leo. So it's a bit of a play on like a piccolo, as in a small coffee. It is a small version of the space as the restaurant as far as aesthetics. So we've carried through and made changes in the restaurant as we did to the smaller component. And that, look, in total, we're a 130 seat venue inside and out. So the offering in the restaurant is a la carte. Everything is done as per I would expect between the two of us, done in house. So we buy everything in whole and make everything from scratch, from pasta through to all of the seafoods being cleaned and stored, as well as all the other proteins. The cafe, we bake our own breads. We bake our own breads for the restaurant as well as the cafe. We do our own in-house pastries. So there's a croissant program and a Danish program and some other bits and pieces that come out of there, as well as the aperitivo, which flips on the afternoon, which also serviced by the kitchen. We run snacks and a couple of fixed plates, as well as using all bits and pieces that are left over in the kitchen when we do our breakdowns to generate a snack platform that'll change daily, weekly through the menu cycle, and it's something that we put out as a free offering when you sit down and you're having a drink.
What's it like for you after running a tiny degustation style restaurant for 10 years, opening a big restaurant with a la carte?
Yeah, it's, you know what, it's a different buzz. The city is such a Oscillate was so controlled. You had every single second of the day accounted for. You could work out exactly how many patrons who were coming in the door. You knew exactly what they were eating. You could work out how much money you could spend on every single component of that menu. Here is like a hugely different kettle of fish. We're so lucky. We've got, next door Maryvale being our neighbour, the Ivy Complex with Felix and Ash Street and all their other venues here. The crowds that they are able to bring, like almost immediately back into this precinct with their PR machine that's just constantly churning, means we get a huge overflow from them, as well as a lot of people who are interested in what we're doing just from the press that we've had already. So the customer base that we've got, which we sort of had an idea as to what we were going to have before everything shut up shop, has started to trickle back. But this operation is there's 3 different things going at once here, which is it does make my head spin occasionally.
How is the city? You mentioned earlier that when you did get the keys and you went to open up, the city was a ghost town. What's it like now? Has it picked up?
It's definitely getting more and more. There's definitely more and more people starting to head out, and look, it's still, for us, we're still mapping like the demographic of customer that are coming through. Thursday is the new Friday by the looks of things in the city, where people are now tagging Friday as a day off and spending the weekend as a long weekend. So Monday through to Thursday is the business crowd, and then the weekends, Friday, Saturday is busy. Like we're allowed to do obviously the capacity that we're allowed to do, which we achieve. But the people that are coming into the city are not per se coming to spend the day in the city, wander around and then go for dinner. They're just coming in to dinner as their reservation, and then they're leaving and going home for the most part. So, yeah.
What's been the reaction from your customers? Have they been happy to be out, or have there been some that are a little nervous?
No, I think, well, at the very beginning, I think people were, as far as the guests that have actually dined, everyone is extremely happy to be out. We did have people who probably preempted their opinions and made reservations that cancelled, and a lot of them just gave us notice that they don't feel comfortable. And I think that was obviously with the shifting of numbers of the way things were occurring here and abroad, which is completely fair enough. Like, we completely understand that there's no point coming out and sitting in a space and trying to enjoy dinner if you're not going to relax and enjoy the experience. So at the end of the day, I think there was no pressure on our end to try and force people to, commit to definitely coming if they'd made a reservation. You have to, like everything now, the flexibility is on both ends. It's on their end as well as ours.
Both you and Federico are pretty extraordinary chefs, but how do you decide what goes on the menu? How do you work together?
So our wonderful plan before everything turned upside down was, look, LuMi as a business and as a model, I'm well aware of how it operates because that's the same as Oscillate. So our business plan with this was that we were actually going to split the businesses between us, and as far as operations go, we would spend time between us at both venues and swap over, because I still love that platform as well, as far as intricate fine dining progression, all of those things that are fine dining. So for me to just turn it straight off, it wasn't something that I was willing to do straight away. So this business became something where we were going to start to share time between the two of them, between us, to which we haven't been able to do because it's just not possible. LuMi's running on a short staff. He lost a lot of staff when everyone had to leave. The city, we lost staff we'd had committed to that had given us commitment that had to leave and go back overseas or back interstate. And it was just going to be really silly for us to try and run that platform between the two of us because, we're both working 6 days a week as it is at the moment, and that's just trying to make sure that these business, both of them, tick over successfully. So it was a smarter idea for us to split up right now and just get both of them off the ground with one in charge of both. And then when we come back to things being a little bit more viable as far as the staff and the patrons, as far as numbers, we'll go back to that plan. But at the moment, I'm fixed in the city and Federico's fixed at LuMi. And we just speak every day. He bounces in here when he can, during the week if he can. And look, he always knows if he needs anything, I'm always here to help for down there. But this business we've got at the moment, the cafe is Monday to Friday. The restaurant is Tuesday to Saturday. So yeah, it's a 6-day operation here. LuMi, they've gone down to 4 days of operation, but they do a full day of mise en place the day prior, as well as doing weekend Sundays, which is a lunch and dinner platform. So yeah, it's at the moment there's a lot of work for the pair of us, and the smarter thing to do was just to solely focus individually on each platform until we get everything back up running where it needs to be with enough staff, and then we can start to transition between the two.
After so many years running Oscillate and then moving to Leo, are there lessons that you learnt out of the experience of running the business at Oscillate that you've transferred to Leo?
Yeah, most certainly. Oscillate was a business where that was my first business as far as a restaurant goes, and just as a business in general. And I think that was probably one of the most fortunate things for me to have done before doing this, because small business, you have to be able to have an understanding of everything that's happening in the business. I think if you want to be successful and have longevity, you need to know how PR works. You need to know how you work with staff and how you do HR and how you deal with the customer service component and dealing with all manner of business. So for me, I was lucky that on a small scale, I managed to learn a lot over those 10 years. And now it's just a matter of applying all of those things I've learned, but in a larger volume. It's just a bigger scale. And luckily, I'd like to say that we really didn't have very many problems for 10 years at Oscillate across the board, whether it be customer, staffing, anything. Everything always seemed to work the way we wanted it to. So if we just we continued to run in a manner and an operation in the same way, which we've done here, I can't foresee us coming across any problems.
How have you felt during this time? Has it changed you, and how do you feel about the industry sort of coming out of this?
Yeah, look, I'm actually, I find it quite, I like the challenge. I like the fact that we're all doing this at the same time, and hopefully we're all working to achieve success for the future, and that comes down to dealing with our supply chains. It comes down to dealing with our customers and what they're looking for and what they're expecting. Everyone's being extremely flexible at the moment, which is great because a lot of businesses have had to change everything that they're doing just to continue to be able to offer a product and give staff jobs. So look, as sad as it is, the predicament we're all in at the moment, we're all in it together, and I think there are a lot of positives coming out of this. There's people who are thinking differently about the way that they do things, about the way they treat their products, about the way they treat their operations, and yeah, look, I think there are a lot of good lessons to be learned from having to stop and check everything and start again. So, um, look, I'm excited. I think we're lucky we didn't start a business and then have to close it. We were, unfortunately, we lost all of our internal hype that we'd sort of tried to keep the boiling down low so that not everybody knew what was going on, because we were building up to a really big sort of opening platform, and we lost that, which is like, but that's nothing compared to what some people have lost. So look, I'm very fortunate that we're able to continue and every day come in and try and chip away at something else in the business and try and build and build and build, because that's that's where success comes from, is from you know going back in every day, looking at what you're doing, making sure you're doing it right, and then if you're not, changing it and then moving forward.
Leo's such a big detour from Oscillate from a culinary sense, and it's warming up now and it's spring, and I know, having had many conversations with you over the years, how excited you get over particular ingredients when they do come into season. What are you enjoying cooking right at the moment?
Oh, do the one part that's really starting to has hurt me from day one here is I spent a lot of time in 10 years dealing with all of the growers and the markets and getting like really involved in understanding what those guys do. And right now, because of this, it's a no-go zone in the markets at the moment. It's fairly tight to get in, and really, it's not a platform they want people like me running in and out of every other day. The growers that we use, a lot of them didn't seed for the season coming forward, or if they did, they changed what they were planning to do, just because of the fact that they know that there's a possibility that they won't be able to have people purchasing their produce. So, one thing I've really struggled with here is the fact that I'm relying on the contacts that I have there, and getting people to come and pick up and distribute for us. And yeah, everything's changed, obviously, like we all know that. But from an operational perspective, I mean, we still need to be smart about implementing our DNA on what we do. So we're very aware of that, and because people's expectations are going to be from dining experiences in the past, and look, it's that's what we wanted to do anyway. We just needed to think exactly how we could continue with those things and that mindset of what we were doing before, and just put that fingerprint somewhere in the food product we're doing without bastardizing anything. We're not here to take the piss out of any of the traditional components of like Italian dining. And my training, I was trained Italian as an apprentice for 4.5 years, so in a very successful business. So I have a very good understanding. And now it's just about working out how we implement all of that knowledge we've built up over time and the access to all these things that we've been using for so many years, and without, like I said, bastardizing anything. Just working out how we can implement them in to the menu as such. And some things you wouldn't even know they're there. Like, we do some things in the kitchen that we do just because it makes us feel happy we're doing it, and we don't necessarily need the guests to know what it is, let alone have to hear the story of why we're doing it. But it's sometimes we do it, and it's a nice way to put our menu together. But look, spring is obviously, the seasons are changing, and yeah, talking to the growers over the last couple of weeks, with berries and things on their way, and all these sorts of bits and pieces. So hopefully there's still some of the people that we've used for such a long period of time who are, albeit produce smaller volumes, still try and achieve the quality products that we've been so used to getting our hands on for so long.
As we move out of COVID and all the restrictions are gone, what are you most looking forward to?
A day off. I think when this business, unfortunately, we're not. I mean, we are operational, but we're not. We're not eligible for any of the JobKeeper components of the business. We haven't been able to have any access to grants, and like I said, I'm working 6 days a week here in the business, and 1 day a week in front of some paperwork if I can find a couple of hours. I really love to build this team. I really want to add a few more people to this amazing platform because these guys are working so hard. I'd like to be able to build the team. I'd like to be able to have a rostering system where people can have time off. They can come in and dine in the business that they work so hard for. And yeah, I'd look forward to having a day off myself and getting out there and supporting some of the other businesses here because at the moment I don't have time to do that. And it'd be nice to go and sit in somebody else's business and pay a bill.
Well, Karl, mate, it's always good to catch up. You've had an extraordinary year. Keep in touch, and we'll talk again soon.
I will do. Thanks, mate. Thank you so much for the wonderful conversation.
This is the Deep in the Weeds podcast. I'm Anthony Huckstep. Stay tuned as we share the stories of Australia's hospo community, suppliers and producers in search of hope during this pandemic. Special thanks to executive producer Rob Locke for making this all happen. Follow us on Instagram at Deep in the Weeds Podcast or email us at podcast@deepintheweeds.com.au. Stay safe and be well.